The main goal of this session is to focus on how Africa and the Caribbean can collaborate to utilize their natural resources to drive economic development. And we have 4 distinguished panelists who can better explore that topic. To introduce them to you first, we will have Dr. Thackeray Dax Driver. He's the president and CEO of Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Chamber. Dax? We also have on our panel this afternoon the Group Chief Executive for Ando, Adewale Tinubu. The Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chamber, N.J. Ayuk. And a familiar face for the Afri-XM Bank, Global Head of Client Relations, Renee Awambang. Gentlemen, thank you so much for participating in this last panel of the first day of this dynamic conference. I have a question for each one of you, and if you can answer it in the shortest words possible. To what extent does the West's desire to replace supplies of Russia's oil and gas with other suppliers provide opportunities to the Africa and Caribbean regions? Dax?
Okay, so for Trinidad, so just for context first of all, so Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana is one of the world's newest oil provinces, incredibly exciting. Trinidad and Tobago is one of the world's oldest oil provinces, been in the business since the beginning of the 20th century. About 500,000 barrels a day of oil equivalent production, but 85% of that is natural gas. That natural gas goes into LNG, methanol, and ammonia. So obviously the geopolitics with the Russian invasion of Ukraine obviously created a sort of a lot of interest in Trinidad and Tobago as a major exporter of natural gas being the big thing that Europe wanted to buy, not from Russia. And also ammonia, another big export traditionally of Russia and of Ukraine. Trinidad, major exporter of, is actually the world's major exporter of ammonia. Most ammonia is not exported, it doesn't cross the border, it goes into production. Trinidad is a major exporter of ammonia, incredibly important for food. Ammonia goes into fertilizers, so that's how natural gas links to food security. So obviously the changing geopolitics created this interest in Trinidad. Trinidad has, we are in a pretty unique position because we have a lot of available capacity in our downstream part of the industry. We have an LNG train which is currently offline, we have a methanol plant offline, we have an ammonia facility offline. That's all because our upstream production has been declining. So obviously the big push for Trinidad is to increase our investment into Trinidad's upstream, increase our gas production, fill up that downstream infrastructure that we have, and make available to the world secure supplies. And Trinidad has a great reputation of being a secure supplier, really good respect to contracts. We believe in multilateralism. So all the sort of things which the international community looks for, Trinidad ticks all of those boxes. So yeah, there's been a lot of interest in Trinidad because of that geopolitics.
Thank you. Sir?
Definitely, it's huge potential. Africa is 10% of global hydrocarbon reserves, of which 70% is actually gas. So Nigeria, over 170 trillion cubic feet of gas. Mozambique, with the big discoveries there, is close to 100 trillion cubic feet of gas discovered. Phenomenal discoveries all in the last 10 years. Angola, Algeria, and so based on shipping routes and the advantage of close proximity to Europe, African gas is certainly going to do well. But what is interesting is about the geolocation of the Caribbean is approximately 12 days shipping into the west coast of Africa. And oil products are typically very cost sensitive from the logistics side. So we've seen cargoes come from the US West Coast, deliver into West Africa of refined petroleum products. So I expect to see, as Guyanese crude gets as we see increased in production, I expect to see homes for Guyanese crude and Trinidadian hydrocarbons as well on the west coast of Africa. So we're really looking forward to a bit of cross-trade between the two continents, particularly with the additional refining capacity that is being discovered or being created in West Africa, particularly in Angola and Nigeria right now. And slates of crude are necessary. It's a blend that is utilized in most refining processes and not just singular crude from one region. So there are great prospects for the future.
Great answer. Mr. Ayuk?
I think it's an opportunity for African and Caribbean nations with what you see happening in Ukraine, but it boils down to something very, very easy. It's going to mean, can we ramp up capacity? Can we really meet the demand? I hate to tell you, no, we cannot. Because why? We do not have the funding that goes into developing a lot of underexplored fields that are there. So you could have potential, you could have discoveries, but if you cannot ramp it up and bring that gas, then you would not be able to meet European demand and also meet African demand. So it is an opportunity for us to, we could say we've been saved by the belt, but we need to ramp ourselves up and get our house in order to be able to meet that demand. So for us to just say, yes, it is an opportunity, but what are we doing about it? Being able to really go in there, explore more, drill, discover, produce that gas, but also demand on our partners, whether they're coming from Europe or any place where they're saying, you need to produce and give us gas. What are we asking of them? Don't just give us gas. I saw on the news coming here that the Chancellor of Germany is in Nigeria looking for gas. Put some money in the game. You need to put money so you can produce the gas. And I mean, Oando is sitting right here. They stand on so many potential resources. How many people are going to them and say, let us do joint ventures with you? Same with Caribbean companies. That's how you get a lot of the gas out. It's not just demanding it without investing in it.
Great information. Mr. Rene?
Thank you very much. Now, the Ukraine crisis creates significant opportunity for Africa. You know very well that 5 of the top 30 oil-producing countries in the world are on the African continent. The oil and gas sector contributes something like 53% of the GDP of African countries today. In some countries, actually like Equatorial Guinea, Chad, Gabon, it is a very significant percentage of the GDP, physical revenues to those countries. Again, over the last couple of years, we've seen significant discoveries in both gas and in oil. 18 African countries today are producing oil. They are producing they have about 175 million of reserves, barrels of reserves. In terms of gas, over 9% of the world's reserves in gas are in about 20-something African countries, which accumulates to about 18 trillion cubic standard feet meters of gas. So there's a lot of opportunity for the continent. But how do we develop this opportunity to meet our energy resources on the continent? I think that is where the challenge is actually today, in terms of the capacity, not only financially, but also technically, to extract that in a safe way to meet the energy requirements of the continent. And it is for this reason that we at Afreximbank, having identified this problem, in partnership with the African Petroleum Producers Organization, are working together to set up a new platform that will be able to meet this challenge. In the next couple of days, the Council of Ministers of APO will actually meet in Cotonou to actually review the establishment agreements of the Africa Energy Bank, which is a new supernatural financial institution that will be set up jointly between Afreximbank and the Association of Producing Countries to be able to finance this oil and gas potential that is in the continent. We are also pleased to say we have considered the Caribbean as also part of the scope of operations for this energy bank. So at Afreximbank, we actually believe that the African and Caribbean countries should continue to develop their natural resources, particularly in oil and gas, to meet their energy needs. Not only for the potential revenue to the government, but also to power these countries. You know for sure that over 600 million African people go every day without electricity. So we have to take advantage of our resources to power our countries. Thank you.
Mr. Rene, and ladies and gentlemen, I just want to let you know we only have a limited time to hear from these dynamic panelists this afternoon, but Mr. Rene, you gave some excellent statistics just now about the African continent, and my question is, given that Africa and the Caribbean has an abundance of coastlines and sun, what collaboration is there for investing in renewable energy? Renewable energy seems to be a key word right now when it comes to energy.
The geographic location of the Caribbean presents significant opportunities to the energy and the oil and gas sector. First of all, if we look at, let's start with renewables before we go to fossil fuels. If we look at renewables, we can develop new forms of energy in the Caribbean regions that can be exported and transmitted either to North America, Europe, or Southern America, or even Africa itself. So whether they are wind, whether it's solar, all forms of renewable energy can be developed in the continent. In terms of the oil and gas, for logistics, when it comes to storage, when it comes to shipping, when it comes to bunkering, the Caribbean region presents a significant opportunity to have refining capacity on the islands of the Caribbean, to be able to service again the large markets of North America and South America and even the African continent. In terms of storage, you could have a large special economic zone or industrial park in the Caribbean islands to actually service the requirements of the continent, or even to keep strategic stocks here to manage the volatility in the oil and gas value chain.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Ayuku, what do you feel are the major challenges and opportunities for the Afro-Caribbean oil and gas sector?
I think a lot of challenges that we face has been the connection where we have not really worked together in the past. I mean, Dax is here, you've seen a lot of knowledge that has come out of Trinidad when it comes to gas development, yes. But a lot of that has not really passed, we've not really passed on through that capacity in Africa. Nigeria has an amazing history when it comes to oil development, even gas development, and there's a lot of lessons learned. So we've just not collaborated a lot more. Minister talked a lot about, yes, it's not just, don't just look at Guyana or for just oil investment, but there's a lot of opportunities there that we could see. Take, for example, the Nigerian FPSOs, Mr. Tinubu's company, majority of employees are Nigerians. So you could see where you have a huge swath of knowledge, information that has come from Africans, for example, or Caribbeans that have worked with some of the world-class service companies, whether it is Schlumberger of the world or anything, and those skills can be transferred even into renewables. We're not going to get about renewables. I have some very good opinions of them, but we need to make money so we can do renewables. If you're broke, you're never going to go green. So I still think that those opportunities lie, and I think it's a great forum to really, really explore those opportunities where you can then collaborate, find new ways to really build on the service, because not everybody can look at those deep water wells where you're going to have to spot a well for 60 to 90 million. But you can work together to drive up services where you can put, food on the table, and you can share some real economic value into that, and not always be at the bottom end of that. I think let's focus on those solutions and really drive it, but governments have to play a role to really drive it. That's why we have to continue insisting on an enabling environment and really driving our people to be part of this growth.
Excellent information. I support your notion that Dax has a wealth of information because as Dax and I were speaking before this panel, he was telling me that he's been the driver of an electric vehicle for some 4 years now. And Dax, I want you to enlighten our audience on the importance of electric vehicles and how they conserve and protect the environment.
Okay, well, okay, yeah, I have had an electric car for a while now, and it's great, and I'm a big fan of electric cars. I hate to say, I mean, because I know oil is the thing which is driving a lot of economies, but electric cars, yeah, it's happening. They are great in small islands. So for the Caribbean, electric cars are absolutely, you know, the use case in the Caribbean for electric cars is just perfect. Here in Guyana, Suriname, you know, not so much because you have much longer distances. In most of Africa, not so much because you have the distances. On small islands, electric cars are absolutely perfect for small environments. And I think it's happening, and it's just, you know, we need to be aware of it. I think that in a way you just got to almost let the market dictate what's going to happen. But in the Caribbean, on small islands, that's what's going to be the case. It's actually cheaper now in Trinidad to own and run an electric car for 5 years than it is to run an internal combustion engine car. That's just the economics of it. So that's going to happen.
And speaking of electric cars, Mr. Tinubu, how do we ensure access to power for the peoples of the region when we talk about climate change? Give us your view on that.
Well, I think climate change clearly is important, but the oil industry has certainly gotten a bad rap for the challenges which we see. First things first, 60% of the emissions are actually from the coal industry, not from the oil industry. And if you were to convert every coal plant in the world to gas right now, you would achieve net zero immediately. So the reality is that the solutions which we've had and the environmentalists have had towards us achieving climate change have been focused on the wrong fundamentals. What we should be doing is closing down the coal plants and converting them to gas. And gas is a transition fuel. It's been accepted. It's a clean fuel. Converting a diesel generator into gas, you'd get a 50% drop in emissions instantly. That's the first point. Second point to note is that there needs to be a just transition. So continents like Africa, the Caribbean, who've discovered hydrocarbons, are going to use the cheapest source of energy they have, because continent like Africa, where you have 600 million people who don't have access to energy, and Africa generates only 3% of global emissions. And if the whole of Africa, if we were to increase and provide gas-powered electricity for those 600 million people who don't have it, will increase our emissions in the continent from 3% to 4%. I mean, that's clearly, so effectively, the third world is actually a victim of global warming and not a cause of global warming. And that really needs to be taken into account when we seek a just transition for climate change, including the credits that should come from the Western world and the OECD countries for creating this pollution which we all experience in the continent. And that credit should come to the lesser developed countries for them to be able to eventually invest in renewable power sources. But clearly, you need gas as a transition fuel. Electric vehicles are very, very important, yes. Yeah? But as has been said, you know, different markets, even Orlando as a company, we've launched an electric vehicle test run for buses, and we expect to be able to bring in 16,000 units into the country over the next 2 to 3 years. And the results we're getting are fantastic. We're getting 280 miles utilization on one charge from buses which will take 100 people, and the cost saving is like 30–40%. You know, and I think it's worthwhile also just latching on to what Renee had to say regarding the challenges we're facing in our industry and the financing of it. I mean, we must commend African Export-Import Bank for the work it's done in terms of upholding the continent's hydrocarbon financing, where like the European banks and the American banks have withdrawn from financing fossil fuels on the continent. And the emphasis they've placed, even in creating this energy bank, I think the next step really is creating an aftermarket for the products they do, because they finance these deals, but there's a limit to how much they can finance on their balance sheet. And securitization needs to be the key. We need to find a way of selling our story and converting this incredible reserves we have into better value by having an aftermarket for the loans they write on a daily basis in terms of supporting the African and now the Caribbean oil and gas industry. And I see great things about to happen with the emergence and on the scene in the Caribbean region. Thanks.
Excellent information, gentlemen. My final question this afternoon, and I would need all of you to be brief, please. What is or should be the Afri-Caribbean roadmap to energy transition? Dax?
Well, I think that the roadmap is different in every country. There's going to be a different roadmap in the countries which are currently net importers of energy. Now, speaking for the Caribbean, most of the countries are net importers of energy, and they're importing fossil fuels to run vehicles and for the electricity sector. So most countries in the Caribbean now are importing diesel and bunker fuel to run their electricity. They are trying to invest in renewables, but there's limits to how much investment how much renewables you can put on a grid without massive investments in batteries or having a backup supply. And the obvious thing to do is to put a backup supply of natural gas. So I think that the roadmap for the importers is the and conversation, but it's renewables and natural gas. Yeah. And it's also about interconnecting the countries as well, because the bigger grid you can have, the more renewables you can put on it. It's really difficult putting a lot of renewables on a small island grid. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. Okay, so the roadmap for each country is going to look a little bit different, but the first thing is you've got to get a roadmap. The roadmap for Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad is going to look a little bit different. I mean, we have energy security. We're net exporters. There's things that Guyana is doing right now, which I think the minister gave us the Guyana roadmap half an hour ago, so I don't need to go into that again. But every country is going to be different. But I think that I think the things that I'll come back to is and, so it's not or. And I think that this is a big mistake which a lot of development finance banks have made. They said we're not doing anything with fossil fuels. Well, then actually means you can't drive the transition, because you actually have to invest in fossil fuels to drive the transition. So that's a big mistake. So it's and it's then being nimble and being specific to the specific issues of each country that you're in. Thank you. Mr. Tinubu?
I agree with most of what is said. I think the important thing is the energy mix. Countries that have hydrocarbons will need to use those hydrocarbons. Gas is a wonderful transition fuel, and for you to get the kind of base load of power, cheap power that is required to industrialize, means that most countries would have to use gas. And clearly, there's a race against time. I think without a shadow of doubt, there's going to be substantial reduction in diesel consumption over the next 20 years and gasoline consumption. But even to have electric cars on the road, they need to be powered. And they need to be powered in the most efficient way. So you're still going to find, once again, the gas market being certainly a priority.
I think it's very easy. The wealthy nations that have produced hydrocarbons, developed their economies, and done very well, they need to decarbonize. The Caribbean and African nations need to industrialize. It is morally wrong to look at Caribbean and African nations and say, you need to go on the same path like us. Guyana, the minister said by 2030, they'll be at about 1.5 million barrels a day. They need that for their development. You can't just sit someone there to give them a lecture and say, you need to stop. Like, please don't stop. Produce every drop of hydrocarbons you can find, and then use that money to go at your own pace. You are not going to have them. First of all, where is the $100 billion they promised you? It hasn't come. And then you're saying you have to transition. Where you going to have the money from? Afri-Exim is not going to be alone to power that transition without the money. So I'm sorry, we like to watch movies. Wakanda Forever is a good movie, but the Black Panther is not coming. We're going to have to do that ourselves. So produce every hydrocarbons in the ground, use that money to transition. That's our plan for transition. That's how you get a just transition.
Excellent. Mr. Renee, you have several seconds.
It's very difficult to speak on this topic after NG. But I just want to say we stand for a just transition. And I'll give you a very simple example. The biggest culprit of carbon emissions is the shipping industry in the continent. What happens with the shipping industry? They take the raw materials, the raw commodities, the resources that Africa produces, be they agricultural, mining, or metals. They ship it to Europe, North America, Asia. They process it, and they ship it back to the African continent and the Caribbean, and they sell to us. We believe that we need to industrialize Africa, which means we need to transform these primary commodities on the continent to add value and trade between Africans. In that way, we're going to have a just transition. We do not have the resources to change the current forms of energy in the continent. Even those alternative energies that are being proposed to us are not proven, and they are not cost effective, and we do not have the resources to afford them. Let us have a just energy transition for everyone. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, 4 dynamic panelists talking about oil and gas in the Afro-Caribbean. I hope you learned something very new today about the oil and gas sectors in Africa and the Caribbean. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you.